The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
Just chatting a little bit earlier to Faan van der Walt from We Buy Cars, and it's clearly becoming quite a traumatic experience buying a car and selecting the vehicle that is correct for you, because you don't want to be buying a massive gas-guzzling car, for example, now, and in 12 months' time realize that you've overspent and that you can't afford the insurance and that you can't afford the repayments and you certainly can't afford the fuel, and the insurance is a big component of it as well. And so you really have to be well prepared when it comes to making that vehicle acquisition. And I kind of looked at this topic that you wanted to talk about, Warren, and I thought, how to prepare for buying a car? I mean, this isn't marriage. This isn't preparing for an operation. It's probably worse, actually, because unfortunately, no matter what car you're buying, it's a big ticket item, no matter which level you're aiming at.
Absolutely. And I think, when you look at the average income earner in South Africa, someone who is getting a decent salary, and that salary starts to rise through their career, the car purchase decision for me very often is the key decision to determine whether that person will go on the path to financial freedom, or they stay on the path to financial drudgery and the debt burden that just grows on them throughout their career as their ability to earn grows and their debt burdens grow. And I know it's a big statement, but I think just looking at the way people spend money, and when you ask them, looking at your expenses, tell me what proportion of your money goes to your car, tell me what proportion goes to your house, what proportion goes to savings. And very often, the proportion that goes to the car is way bigger than the proportion that goes to their savings. And I know, car decisions in South Africa are key from the point of view. Most of us cannot rely on public transport in South Africa to earn a living. So the moment we can afford to, from an earnings point of view, the moment we can afford to actually buy a car, it is a very key decision, because it might well be the difference between being able to earn a salary and not, or being able to earn a better salary or not. And so I think it is a key financial decision. The problem is, the buying of a car, we're up against two really heavy headwinds here. And the first one is we're up against some of the best marketing engines known to mankind. And those marketing engines are the car manufacturers. They are, and I'm an absolute victim, and I think I must be amongst their favorite victims of all time. But I'm one of those people. I fall prey to reading, about cars as they get released, the new technologies that come out, the ability for the car to almost drive itself and how much less fuel it's going to consume, and all these safety features and everything else. And I find it absolutely enthralling. So for me to walk into a dealership on my own, unprepared and kind of without protection, is really lethal, because there is a really good chance I could be walking out with a car I don't need.
Okay, forewarned is forearmed. I mean, and the pressure in South Africa to have a car that, one, is safe enough, because you don't want it breaking down. You don't want to be stuck on the road at night anywhere, suburbs or on highways, anywhere, rural areas. You want to ensure the car is reliable as possible. You want to ensure that if you do get taken out by another driver on the road, that the car in which you are traveling gives you as much protection as possible, with as many safety features as possible. And for every little extra thing that you buy, it doesn't add up in hundreds or in thousands. It adds up in tens of thousands of rand. So how do we go in forewarned, forearmed, without sort of prejudicing the purchase in the first place, Warren? We want to make the purchase, but we want to make the right purchase. What do we need to have front and center of what our thinking is?
I think the first thing is write down that list of criteria that you absolutely need in a car. So what are the things that are absolutely necessary, not the wants, but the needs. In other words, you need to be able to transport, a family of 3 or a family of 4. That's obviously key. Some people might need to transport a family of 5 or 6, and so that's an important point. You need a car that's either only suitable for short journeys around town, because you don't go long distances, or you do go long distances. So get the key points, and I think critically there, don't buy the car that you need for one holiday a year. Very often talking to people, they'll say to me, I absolutely need an SUV because my family, all my kids and their friends, we all go on holiday, and we need to be able to take all our luggage safely, and and all the things that we need, the dog, the cat, and everything else. And then I ask them how many times they do that, and they do that once a year in December. And so they buy a car that they don't need for the rest of the year, that size and that capacity. Yeah. So that's an example. So get to the point of what you absolutely need. And then, most critically, put down exactly what it is that you can afford to spend, where you're still allocating money for savings, where you're still allocating money for the other expenses in life. And you mentioned at the start, that includes things like insurance. It includes things like maintenance costs, tire changes, all of those things, license fees, and then also you need to say to yourself, what do I do from the point of view when I need to change this car in a few years' time? In other words, how quickly can you pay off this car and then drive a paid-off car? So you've got to make all of those decisions, all of those calculations before you walk or go anywhere near a website or a dealership. You've got to be very prepared as to how you're going to do this. And then I think also insulate yourself from the sales pitch of, we can sell you a car that will meet your monthly budget. In other words, you can only spend 5,000 Rand a month on a car. No problem. We can do that for you. We'll simply sell you the car for the next 8 years that you can pay it off. And then at the end of 8 years, you can pay us a 35% balloon payment.
Okay, now stop right here, Warren, because you now are pushing my buttons. Because you've got to understand that it's not about the monthly affordability. It's not that you can afford 5,000 Rand a month. It's a case of understanding what the overall purchase price of the car is. If you've got money for a deposit, to put as much of a deposit down as possible, to shorten the repayment term of the car, and to get it paid off in the shortest possible time. If you can possibly pay cash for the car, pay cash for the car. But don't get caught in the trap of extending the term of payment because it's offered to you. There's nothing more debilitating than 6 years into an 8-year car payment to be simply thinking, this thing's falling apart. And I've driven it like a lunatic and it's had a few bangs and bashes, and I've claimed on my insurance already and my premium's gone through the roof, and I've still got 2 years of payments on the skedonk. And then, to add insult to injury, because you could afford 5,000 Rand a month and they sold you the fancy BM or the fancy Merc or whatever it was that you really shouldn't have bought because you were more a Corolla sort of person, and with all due respect to Corollas, they're lovely cars, you now sit with a balloon payment of 25 or 30%, and you've now got to find cash to pay for this thing. Otherwise, you've got to give it back, and it's not worth what you thought it would be worth when you bought it 6 or 7 years ago. It's a horrible set of circumstances you can get caught up in.
Absolutely. And just quickly, in defense of Corollas, the Corolla will probably have a better resale value compared to what you paid for it by the end of the 8 years. So I think that your comment on the upfront payment is key there. So building up the biggest deposit you possibly can is a key point. And I would say that I can't find a justification. I have not seen one in my lifetime so far, so I can't say I've read every financial model ever given to someone when they're trying to buy a car, but I've never seen the justification for a balloon payment at the end. The other key point there is when you're looking at that monthly repayment calculation that's being offered to you, look at the interest rate, because when I look at the interest rates being offered to people to buy cars, in most instances, that interest rate is really high. It's often 4 or 5% higher than what you would pay on a home loan. So that leads me maybe to my other very key point here is, you said try and buy the car cash. I agree 100%. But maybe even more importantly, absolutely ignore buying a new car. I know that's really going to upset the motor manufacturers. They need to sell lots of new cars. They can sell that to someone else. If you're a private individual and you're doing this to get yourself around, and financial freedom is important to you, buy a second-hand car, because you're going to save a huge amount of money. At the very least, out of every 100,000 Rand, you're probably going to save 15,000 Rand just by buying a car that's 1 year old. And if you're not going to drive a heck of a lot, and you have got time on your side, buying a 3-year-old car, the safety argument is nonsense. Cars are so well made nowadays that a 3-year-old car is incredibly safe. So you can read up about the safety of the car before you buy it, by all means, but But if a car has been well serviced and well maintained for the first 3 years of its life, and you drive it for another 5 years, I'm very sure that if you've looked after it properly, it's still an incredibly safe vehicle. So safety is not an argument, and I think that that's a key point here. Don't fall prey to the sales pitch. You've got to say to yourself, I'm doing something for me and my family to get us from point A to point B so that we can earn an income, so that we can get to financial freedom, not so we can make the motor manufacturers rich or the finance houses who are selling us cars over 8 years and giving us those big balloon payments at the end at 13% interest rates. All of that stuff is rubbish. It's just not in your best interests. It's in their best interest. And I think it's a key point here. And maybe one other thing, and I must say that this is the way I protect myself, is I have all of these conversations with my wife before the time. We discuss this ad nauseum and probably for 6 months before we make a decision. And she is particularly not a car person. So when that car buying decision comes, I take her with. And she's my protection. She is my bodyguard against making bad financial decisions here. And I think if you're a single person and you're about to go and buy your first car, I'm not saying new, but new for you, take somebody with you that's done this a lot before. Take somebody with you who's not emotional about cars, who's completely focused on the financial side of this.
Because the upsell danger at that moment of the transaction, for only an extra 1,000 Rand a month, I can give you the little dangly balls that hang from the tow bar. Oh, did I not mention the tow bar was an extra? But you must have a tow bar because maybe one day you'll want to have a boat. And, what happens if your kids, you don't have kids, but you will have kids and they'll need bicycles and you'll need to, oh my goodness gracious me. And you're going to get yourself talked into brokenness. But thank you, Warren. I think it's a very important and valuable conversation. There's another bit we need to talk about, and it's an email from Esther, who's turning 48 this year and is starting to think more about retirement and wants to make sure that she's doing the right thing with investments. And there's been a recent change in legislation, which means that her pension fund is likely to have more offshore exposure. That was a big breakthrough in the budget this year. Her tax-free savings account is invested offshore through a feeder fund. Long-term investment account is invested in a local balanced unit trust fund. Although I think my offshore exposure will be somewhere between 40 to 50%. Is it necessary to increase my offshore exposure? I don't plan to move to another country, so should I invest directly offshore? It's a great question, and it's one with which people are grappling all the time, Esther. That question answered by Warren in a moment.
The Money Show.
Personal Finance with Warren Ingram.
So Esther's laid out her case. She's got good investments and she wants to do more investing. Does she need to increase her offshore exposure, which currently sits between 40 and 50%? Warren.
I think you're right. It's an absolutely key question that a lot of people are grappling with now. My view is that if you're going to retire with just enough money, so in other words, you do your calculations and you get to the point where you say, I'm probably going to use most of my money over my lifetime. I'm going to leave behind maybe a little bit to the next generation, but not much. And I do plan to stay in South Africa. I think having an allocation around about 25 to 50% of your investments in overseas markets, it makes a lot of sense. I don't think you need to do more than that. I think if you're at the point where you believe you might leave behind a decent amount of money to the next generation, then moving your overseas allocation from that level, from 25 to 50 to a range of 50 to 75% makes sense. And if you're one of the Rockefellers and you're going to leave behind lots of money to lots of generations, then maybe increase that allocation to 75% offshore. And the reason there, just to explain that, is you're not making a call on South Africa. You're making a call on investing over periods of very long periods of time. If you're investing for 2 generations, that's 50 to 75 years from now. And that means you need to be phenomenally diversified across as many countries as possible, across as many sectors as possible. And then, your major exposure to one country doesn't make sense. So the call is more about your financial position than worrying about timing markets or timing the rand or making a forecast about the JSE or the SA economy over the next 5 years. The truth is, none of us know. We can all give you great arguments about why we think the rand is going to strengthen or weaken, what the JSE is going to fall or rise, and the truth is we don't know. So when you're in a position like this and you're trying to make these long-term decisions for yourself. I think build it around the things you know and the things you can control, and then decide. So in your case, Esther, I mean, I think it's going to be dependent on what sort of money you have and how much you're going to leave behind to the next generation. But that ratio, 40 to 50%, I think is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Do you need to specifically open up an offshore account and send the money directly overseas? I'm not convinced, unless it's really significant amounts that you've built up in big lump sums. But if you're doing monthly savings, either in tax-frees or in retirement funds, or just a little bit extra in other unit trusts or exchange-traded funds, no problem. You can do that into what they call feeder funds, which give you the good offshore exposure, but you don't go through that process of having to pay for foreign exchange conversion costs and convincing SARS that you're not a drug smuggler or something like that. You can do all of this stuff, in South African investments only.
Okay. People are, again, the internet is a weird and wonderful place. Social media is particularly divisive on this issue, and you've got lots of vested interests. And we've spoken about this many times in the past, and people are pushing their own agendas, pushing very hard to have you buy their products. And you've got to be very clear as to what the intention of the person who is promoting their particular view on the world is. Is their view to help you? Are they good people who want to help you? Or are they people who want to sell you their product regardless of whether it's right for you or not? And I think that's a critical distinction to be able to make.
Absolutely. I think, to me, the way to decipher or to kind of, filter the wheat from the chaff in an instance like this is to say, what is their message? What is their core message? If they're selling me an investment because it's appealing to fear, in other words, they're telling me South Africa's going down the tubes and the only way is out, that's a really bad sign as far as I'm concerned. Or if they're selling you purely on greed, that you've got to go and buy this, newfangled investment because it's going to double your money every year or every second year. Another really bad sign. Investment decisions that are made for 2 or 3 decades, and that's the case with someone like Esther, is you've got to say it's got to be really strategic, really rational, really well thought out, and very much built around you as the individual investor and your requirements, not about what a fund manager or a product provider or some salesman thinks about the next year or two. Because the truth is, they're often caught out. They're very often wrong, and they don't kind of brag about their wrongs. They obviously only brag about the 1 or 2 times a year that they or decade even that they're right, and that's a terrible way to kind of take a long-term recommendation.
Before we talk about your phrase of the week, a little bit of context on this one, because the youngest member of our household is about to turn 10 years old, and I was having a little moment the other day, as one does at wake-up time, and you're looking at this cute little thing in bed, and you are saying, I can't believe that you're already 9 and you're going to be 10 next week. It's unbelievable to me. And his response to this, and I said, I can't believe you're going to be double digits soon. And he looked up at me and he went, "Oh, no." I said, "What do you mean, oh, no? Aren't you excited about what we've got planned?" He said, "Yes. But it's another year closer to paying tax." And I just thought to myself, my boy, be paying attention. Oh, it's all been worthwhile. Oh, man, it was one of those great moments. What is income tax? My 9 turning 10-year-old knows, and he's not looking forward to it very much.
So income tax is the tax that governments will impose on us, and our government is no different, on those of us as individuals where we earn tax. For example, we earn an income from a salary, or we earn rent, or we earn interest. We will need to pay a portion of that to the government, and that's generally going to be called personal income tax. And equally for companies that operate in South Africa, where they're earning income as well, that they would pay corporate income tax. And that in a good country, in a good well-managed economy, that money is used by government to fund, education, hospitals, roads, all of those things. So it's a very necessary form of tax, much as none of us will ever want to pay it. But it is necessary for a functioning society to work properly over the long term. But certainly income tax, it's usually for individuals somewhere around, let's say, on average about 20 to 45% of what we earn. And then for companies, it's currently 28%, about to go down to 27% of what companies earn. So very different from things like VAT and all the other kinds of taxes, capital gain tax. This is the core main tax that individuals and companies earn on the income that they generate in a normal tax year.
Thank you. Warren Ingram, Executive Director at Galileo Capital, regular contributor to The Money Show, and personal finance specialist Warren Ingram this evening.